Welcome to Not Your Daily Stories. I'm Rosa Pandey.
And I'm Sam Meekings. And we're your co-hosts.
Each episode, we talk to media professionals about their work, discuss wide-ranging topics with our community, or take a deep dive into narratives shaping student life here at Northwestern Qatar and beyond. In this episode, a conversation about finding your voice through filmmaking. Rana Kazkaz is an award-winning filmmaker whose films have been recognized at the world's leading film festivals, including Cannes, Sundance, Tribeca, Abu Dhabi, and others. With a focus on Syrian stories, her producing, screenwriting, and directing portfolio includes Mare Nostrum, which has been selected in over 90 international film festivals and has won more than 30 awards, Searching for the Translator, a 2016 documentary, Ham, Death Day, Exquisite Corpse, and Kimosabi. Her next project, The Translator, will be her first feature film and has won several development awards, including the Art Award at L'Atelier de la Sainte Foundation at the Cannes Film Festival, the CNC Award at Meetings on the Bridge at the Istanbul Film Festival, and a Tribeca Alumni Grant.
I started working on it right after the Arab Spring-related events began in Syria in March 2011. But right from the beginning, as fear quickly set in, and I realized that I was not going to be participating actively in the demonstrations that were happening, the peaceful demonstrations, I did, however, recognize within myself that I needed to testify in some way. In the beginning, while I was writing, it actually took me months and months to even write in the screenplay that the events were taking place in Syria. And for a long time, I left it be an unnamed country, just because it took me a while to just get over my fear of writing Syria on the page. As I was writing the film, it was also changing me, that I was finding my voice through the writing.
Here is the synopsis for The Translator. Having gotten into trouble with the Syrian government, Sammy has been living for years as a political refugee in Australia, working as an Arabic-English translator. And although he has adapted well to his new life, he is haunted by feelings of guilt for having abandoned his brother and sister. In 2011, the Syrian revolution starts unexpectedly, and Sammy receives a video of his brother being arrested for peacefully demonstrating. The horrifying event brings up painful memories of when their father was arrested by the regime 30 years earlier. Seizing this moment as a way to make up for the past, Sammy makes a dangerous journey back to Syria in order to find his brother. Once there, Sammy becomes increasingly aware of his responsibility towards his country and family, leading him, just like his father and brother did, to risk everything for freedom.
I have made several short films, but this is my first feature-length film. It's taken 9 years to actually reach completion.
Did you have a sense when you started working on this project of just how epic the journey was going to be from, the first ideas through to completion?
Not at all. And I mean, it's one of those things where it's better oftentimes that we don't know, because it might have prevented us from going forward. So in certain ways, naivete is responsible for actually completing the film. I think there's two things that were difficult about the journey. One was just the typical route of the difficulties of just making a film in general, which comes with the territory. But I think the other difficulty that I did not expect within myself is the emotional journey it was going to put me on in terms of recognizing what it meant to tell this story. For example, in the beginning, while I was writing, it actually took me months and months to even write in the screenplay that the events were taking place in Syria. And for a long time, I left it be an unnamed country, just because it took me a while to just get over my fear of writing Syria on the page.
And do you think when making the film, that this process provided some sense of, catharsis of facing up to all these terrible things that have happened in Syria for you and the actors, or do you think it was traumatic, or do you think it was a useful process?
It's going to still take me a while to figure out the answer to that question. But I will say that the process has been, I've had to have a lot of humility in the creation of it, because from the beginning up until this day, I am reminded by how other people were brave in the way that they have stood up for themselves and justice for Syria and Syrians in ways that I have not been. And people kindly comment and say, well, you've made this film, that's something, or that's your way of participating. And whereas you could say that's true, I recognize deeply, excuse me, the privilege of that, and also the recognition that creating a film pales in comparison to the courage other people have had to display and the consequences that they have suffered as a result of speaking out. The Translator follows the main character, Sammy, who is living in exile in Australia. He's had to live in exile because when he was invited to be the translator for the Syrian Olympic team in 2000 in the Sydney Olympics, he made a faux pas, a slip of the tongue, while translating for an athlete. And this slip of the tongue exposed his true feelings about the Assad regime, negative feelings, and out of fear for what might happen to him, the consequences that he might have to pay should he return to Syria, he decided to stay in Australia. So when we meet him, we see that he's been working as an Arabic English translator in Australia, that he managed to build a new life for himself, managed to find love in his life, managed to have a career and friendships. However, he still harbors the guilt and the knowledge that he abandoned his family and his country. In 2011, he is translating the other videos of the citizen journalists coming out from Egypt and Tunisia related to what's happening during the Arab Spring. And unexpectedly, one day, he receives a video from Syria showing that his brother has been arrested for participating in a peaceful demonstration. And so he begins his journey, which is at this moment, which is that he will decide to make up for what he believes are mistakes of the past and illegally smuggle himself back into Syria in order to find his brother. And once he does finally get in and encounters his people from his past, each encounter provides further evidence to him that he can no longer just remain a translator and hide behind the words of others. He will have to use his words and say what he believes in.
And you said it took, you started working on this 9 years ago. I mean, I'm not sure how long usually it takes to make a film, but I assume that's quite long. Can you tell us about that journey from start to finish?
Well, I mean, some films actually do take that long to make. More often than not, they're, especially in independent cinema, these films are lingering in development for long periods of time. Certain things you write with more ease, perhaps, or it finds its way much more quickly. But that was not the case with this film at all. It took me a long time, and I made a lot of mistakes in the writing of this film, particularly with regards to the theme. So I think that part of what took so long was that I didn't find the right theme at the very beginning. I didn't know what it was that I was trying to say. At first, I thought that this was supposed to be a film that examined fear and courage. And so that's what I was going with for a long time, is this exploration of character, of this main character of Sammy, and how he goes from a journey of fear to courage. But unfortunately, it just ended up making him much too passive. So, after years of writing various versions of that script and recognizing that it wasn't working, I moved on to another theme. And that second theme was that I thought I would explore that the theme of what was meant by freedom and dignity, which is exactly what people were chanting for in the streets. And so, again, for a couple of years, I followed in that vein, writing, and it didn't work. Why did that not work? Because thematically, it was way too abstract. And then we shared the screenplay with a man named Paul Federbush, who at the time was in charge of the feature film program at Sundance. And he said, what's most interesting about your film is that Sammy has to find his voice at the end. That he's a translator who can no longer hide behind his words, realizes he can no longer hide behind his words. And so that really clicked with me. And so then I started to explore this theme of what it means to find your voice. And I recognized how personal that theme was for me as well, that as I was writing the film, it was also changing me, that I was finding my voice through the writing. And it was only then that I think the story shaped up to be what it was meant to be. So that took a lot of time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, since the start of the global pandemic, recently we've been faced with some trying times right at the end of this 9-year journey. So I'm curious about the challenges you've been faced with given the current restrictions due to the COVID pandemic. And how have you been preparing for the release of your feature film during such an unusual and difficult time?
Yeah, my heart goes out to all the other filmmakers who are in a similar boat as us, meaning that on the one hand, we were very lucky because the Translator won Best Film and Development at the Atelier at Cannes in 2017. And as a result, we were able to get on some pretty big partners such as Arte, and we found distribution with Ad Vitam, and we got a sales agent to our Charade. And for a first-time feature to get partners of that magnitude was quite it was something we were quite proud of and very lucky to have. And then in addition, our short film that we had made, Mare Nostrum, which had gone to Sundance and went on to over 100 festivals, has won many awards, blah, 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 blah. But what that all translated into was that it gave investors and grant givers let's say, the belief in us enough to think that giving us the money that we needed was worthwhile. So here we are, having spent all this time amassing these partners, getting these awards, making a short, doing all the things that you're meant to do in order to instill confidence in people that you're ready to make a feature film. Well, then suddenly, COVID hits exactly at the moment that we were actually in finishing the film in post-production. So it took us a lot longer to complete the film as a result. But now what you're seeing is that the traditional model of how you release a film by going perhaps to a big festival, and then you get subsequent festivals after that, and that you might start to sell the film in various territories around the world, and then perhaps to a streaming site. That whole model is completely upside down at the moment. And I just read an article that said it's going to take even a few years from now for the film industry, and I imagine all industries, to actually understand how COVID has created the necessity for a new model. So I don't know what's going to happen with all of that yet. We did get into Toronto, created a special sidebar this year. So we were selected for their new category called Industry Selects, in which they selected 30 films that represented films that they wished they could have selected, but that they thought were of particular might be of particular interest to industry buyers, et cetera, et cetera. So we did manage to get in that. And then I won't be able to announce it yet, but in about 2 weeks, we do know where our world premiere is going to take place. So we will have a world premiere at a festival, but it's very exciting. However, what becomes, the joy, part of what you hope will be the joy and have made the whole 9-year journey worth it is that you get the opportunity to actually share the film with an audience, see it screened somewhere big, have Q&As, begin to interact and understand what this piece of art and how it's affecting people and the feedback you're getting from people. So it's great we're having this world premiere, but for example, they don't know if they can invite us. They don't know what the conditions of the screening will be. They just sent us an email to even say that the Q&A will be pre-recorded. So even the Q&A, in which you hope to have actual live interaction with people, is not even going to happen in the traditional sense. So all of that is disappointing.
You've had, quite a lot of experience with screenwriting, directing, producing, and going back to the start, what kind of got you started? Like, how did you start your journey in filmmaking? What inspired you? And also, what do you consider to be some of your most important lessons that you've learned along this journey?
So I started acting when I was 8 years old. I was taking lessons. It's all I thought about. It's all I wanted to be, was an actor. And so it's what I ended up, studying in my undergrad. It's what I ended up getting my MFA in acting from grad school. And then after that, I moved to New York, lived there for 8 years and tried to be an actor. And all of it was just an enormous struggle. Struggling, I struggled again in the typical ways an actor thinks that they might struggle, that it's just a highly competitive field, et cetera, et cetera. But what disappointed me, what was really hard to come to terms with, was the fact that if I was going to be up for a role or be considered for a role, that I was going to be limited to roles that were characters of Arab women of Arab descent, usually defined by non-Arab or Middle Eastern writers. And these were roles I didn't connect to. They were roles I didn't they were far and few between. And I started to just hate acting. It started to eat away little by little at something that I had used to love so much. And I didn't understand why. I understood why that was happening, but I didn't know what to do about it. So then I started to produce theater in New York, and I started by working with other theater companies, and we would put a call out for plays written by Arab or Muslim or Middle Eastern people and start to produce those. And that became satisfying. But then I realized that actually what I wanted to do was I wanted to start to write these stories myself. That I also thought I had a good idea of what, at least what the stories that I wanted to see told, right? It started kind of with their, like, what story did I wish was being told? So I started to write. And interestingly enough, I started to get recognition as a writer in a way that I had never managed to get recognition as an actor. And this was the first time that I realized that perhaps I was onto something here. And then I started to write. And then there was a certain film that I had written called Kimosabi. And then I realized I wanted to direct it also, that I had a vision for it. And so I applied to the American Film Institute they have a special program called the Directing Workshop for Women, where every year they select 8 women for this program. And if you are one of the 8 women, you actually get to go to film school for free. And so I got into that program and with this short film, Kimosabi, which I wrote and directed. It was my very first film. And at that same time, I met my husband, Enes, and, we quickly got married, and he said, come live with me in Syria. And, I said, why? Okay, fine. Well, let's go ahead and try that. And that's what we did. And that's kind of, what brought me up to full circle at the beginning of our conversation, which is, where that has led me until this day. So.
Among our students, we've got this big community of aspiring filmmakers and storytellers. So what advice would you give them? I mean, especially now with this ongoing pandemic, when there's so many challenges, maybe some opportunities as well. How do you think aspiring filmmakers could, navigate this complex time and situation and world?
So I'm the faculty advisor for Studio 20Q. And it's actually something that we talk about in our weekly meeting often, was how can we best help the students at NUQ navigate this challenging time. And what's difficult is that we are also navigating it at the same time. So we are planning to do a kind of marketing and distribution workshop for the students in NUQ to help them navigate what filmmaking means in COVID. But every week when we discuss what is that going to look like, what information would we want to share, we recognize that we come up against the same obstacle, which is that it's also not clear for us right now. So we know that we will have it, but we still are kind of waiting for the dust to settle, at least a little bit more, so that we can better, advise students with information out there. But, even in the professional industry, in professional filmmaking world, it's the same thing. They also don't really know what's happening. It's trial and error right now. They can make predictions and guesses about what should be done, but projects are on hiatus. Crews are smaller. Films are movie theater chains and movie theaters are shutting down. Films are going right to streaming, whereas before they might have sought some kind of theatrical audience. I guess for now, what we can do is we can write.
Definitely.
We can do that. So I have a feeling that 5 years from now, we are going to just be at the beginning where we start to see some really powerful stories in filmmaking coming out of what it meant for so many people to be taking this time just to write.
That's something to look forward to then, hopefully.
I think so.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for being here and sharing about your film and about your journey as a filmmaker. It was really, really nice to have you here.
It was really nice to be with you guys, and I'm just so grateful to be part of our NUQ community. There's nowhere else I'd rather be teaching.
Thank you for listening. And do get in touch with us via Instagram or Twitter @yourTDQ to let us know what you thought of this episode, or even to let us know what you'd like to see in future episodes of Not Your Daily Stories.
This episode was produced by Rosa Pandey, co-hosted by Rosa Pandey and Sam Meekings, with editing by Ahmed Jassim.